Hey guys, I am back with the second video on the video series of Tissues Class 9 Science, and in this video we are going to learn about the plant tissues. I am Roshni from LearnoHub, the free learning platform where you can learn math, science, tips and tricks absolutely for free at learnohub.com. So let us look at the broad classification of plant tissues. Now, broadly, plant tissues are classified into two types, that is meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. Now, the names might be quite fancy for you. You might be wondering, what is this meristematic tissue? Well, as I mentioned before also, that in biology you will always have names which are tricky and topsy-turvy, but again, when you actually understand them, you also get to know how did it get this name, right? So we were now going to talk about meristematic tissue in detail. So let us see what is a meristematic tissue. So let us see what are meristematic tissues. Now let me give you a hint about the name of the meristematic tissue, and what is the meaning of this term meristematic. And then let me see if you can guess something, that what is it going to be. Now this meristematic tissue is derived from a Greek word merist, which actually means divided. So now can you guess what are these tissues going to be? I think you can guess something which can divide, right? So simple to remember, meristematic tissue. Merist means divided. So something which can divide should be meristematic tissue. That is your guess, right? So let us see. So the group of cells that have ability to divide are meristematic tissues. So the group of cells that have ability to divide, they are meristematic tissues. Now, as I mentioned in my previous slide, that in case of a plant, the growth is limited to specific regions, and those regions are known as the dividing regions. So what kind of cells should be present in those regions? The cells which can divide, right? So those cells are known as, those cells group up together to form meristematic tissues. So these tissues, so now if you look at the next point, they are present only in certain regions. So plant growth is restricted to those regions. So these regions are known as meristems. So that means meristems are those regions of the plant where the growth is more, because meristems are the regions where meristematic tissues are present. So it is very obvious, right, that in a plant, wherever you have such tissues which have the capability to divide, only their growth will take place. So these kind of tissues are only present in certain regions, and those regions are known as meristems. Now these meristematic tissues results in primary and secondary growth in plants. So now you must be wondering, what is this primary and secondary growth? Okay, let me try to explain it in little more detail. So it is said that meristematic tissues are those tissues which are forever young. That means they can divide throughout their life. So they will never lose the capability to divide. Now what happens when they divide? Now when these meristematic tissues actually divide, what will happen? So these cells will divide, so new cells will be formed. Right? Now when new cells will be formed, what will happen to those new cells? Now some of the new cells will remain in the meristem. That means it will remain in that area where meristematic tissues actually lie. But some new cells will be pushed away from this region of division. So let us try to understand it like this. Let us suppose this is the meristem. This box is the meristem. I'm just taking an example. I'm just trying to explain you this scenario. Let us suppose this is the meristem. So what is the meristem? Meristem is the house of meristematic tissues. That means the dividing tissues. So all dividing tissues lie inside this box. So this box is your meristem. Correct? So now let us suppose inside this meristem you have many meristematic cells. So these are the cells which are actually forming the meristematic tissues. Now these cells have the capability to divide. Now let us suppose that this cell divided and it formed many new cells. So these are the new cells which are formed. Right? Now what will happen to these new cells? Now some of the new cells will remain inside the meristem, but some of these cells will be pushed out of the meristem. So they will be pushed away from the meristem. So now what happened? So some of the new cells which remained inside the meristem, so they are again going to be meristematic in nature because they are in the region of active division. So that means the cells which remained inside the meristem, they are again capable of dividing. But the cells which went away from the meristem, they are not capable of dividing anymore because they are no more in that region. Because meristem is the region where the active growth actually takes place. So these cells which are pushed away from the meristem, so these cells are known as derivatives. And the new cells which were formed but which remained inside the meristem, they are known as initials. Right? So now again what will happen? So new cells will keep on adding by repeated cell division of initial cells because these initial cells are staying inside meristem. So again cell division will take place. So more and more cells will keep on forming. And now as more and more cells form, growth will be seen. Let us suppose if this is the shoot of a plant. I am just taking these examples just to make you understand what actually happens, right? Now, this is the meristem. I am just showing you the meristem part where actively growing cells are present or the cells which can divide are present. Now, as they keep dividing, some cells are remaining inside, they are initials, and those who are thrown away, they are derivatives. So right now I am not bothered about derivatives. Now let us suppose these cells will keep on dividing. Now as they keep on dividing, more and more cells will be formed. So now when more and more cells formed, what is happening? The size is increasing. Again more and more cells will be formed. So the size will increase further and this process keeps continuing. And it keeps continuing because as I mentioned before, the meristematic tissues, these tissues remain young forever. That means they will never lose their capability to divide. They will have the ability to divide forever. Right? So now you understood what are meristematic tissues, the tissues which have the capability to divide. So because of these tissues, growth is seen in plants. Now the growth is limited to certain regions because these tissues are present in certain regions and those regions are known as meristems. Now what happens inside meristem? When the cells divide, new cells are formed. Now some new cells remain inside the meristem. They are known as initials, whereas some other new cells are thrown away from the region of division or they are thrown away from the meristem. They are known as derivatives. Right? Now these initials will again divide further and give rise to new cells and this process will continue. Correct? I hope there is no doubt here. You should be able to understand what are these tissues. Correct. Okay. Now let us look at what is this primary and secondary growth which we are talking about. Now in plants, we talk about two types of growth. One is primary growth, which talks about the increase in length of the plant. Let us suppose you have a pot in which you have planted. This is a pot. You have planted this plant, right? So let us suppose right now it has, this is how the plant looks like. Now in due course of time, what happens? Now these are the roots of the plants. Now in due course of time, you will see that the length of the shoot will increase. The roots have also gone deeper inside. So what is happening actually? The length of the plant is increasing. So this growth is known as primary growth. So when I talk of primary growth, I am basically talking about the increase in length of the plant or the increase in height of the plant. Now, increase in height or increase in length implies the increase in the height of the shoot the increase in the height of the root. So that is known as primary growth. When I talk of secondary growth, I am talking about the thickness of the plant. You would have also seen that initially maybe it was thin, but later this becomes thick. Again, when this plant becomes a tree, somewhat like this, then it becomes even thicker. So if you see, the thickness also increases, right? So this growth is known as secondary growth. So the primary growth is always lengthwise and the secondary growth implies widthwise, right? Widthwise means the thickness of the root, correct? So that means these meristematic tissues, it results in the increase in length of the plant, and it also causes a secondary growth. That means it also increases this width of the plants. That's what I told, right? The entire growth of the plant is classified into two types, primary growth and secondary growth. This primary and secondary growth is caused by the meristematic tissues. Now, even inside this meristematic tissues also, you will have many different types of tissues, and we will talk about them later. So now here another point which I would like to mention is, so till now I spoke about the initials. So these initials will remain inside the meristems and they will have the capacity to divide. Now what will happen to the derivatives which are thrown away from the meristem? So the derivatives which are thrown away from the meristem, in due course of time, as they mature, their characteristics will change and they become permanent tissue. So in the previous slide, I told you there are two types of plant tissues, meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. So meristematic tissues are those tissues which have the ability to divide. Permanent tissues are going to be those tissues which do not have the ability to divide. So these derivatives, as they mature, they gradually become permanent tissue. That means these derivatives will not have the capacity to divide. Clear? So I hope you have understood this, right? So if you have not understood it, please repeat this slide once again. Now let us look at the characteristics of a meristematic tissue. So what are the specific characteristics which all meristematic tissues generally show? So the meristematic tissues are generally small cells. I mean, these tissues are made up of cells, right? So the cells are generally small cells. They have dense cytoplasm. So I don't think I need to explain you what is a cytoplasm now, because I have explained all these things in our previous lesson, right? They have thin cell walls. So what was cytoplasm? Cytoplasm was the fluid which was present inside a cell. What was cell wall? It was the wall outside the cell which acts as a protective covering, which acts as an additional protective covering for a plant cell. It is not present in animal cells, right? Now, just think of yourself. I mean, instead of just memorizing the characteristics of permanent tissues, just try to understand why do permanent tissues have these kind of characteristics. Why do you think that permanent tissues are made up of small cells? Why do they have dense cytoplasm? Why do they have thin cell walls? Now, what is the main characteristic? What is the main purpose of a meristematic tissue? They are dividing tissues. That means they always want to divide. Now, if they always want to divide, is it better if they have a thick cell wall or if they have a thin cell wall? Now, if they have, let us suppose if this is a plant cell and if this is the cell wall. So if they have a very thick cell wall, it will be difficult to break that cell wall and divide, right? But if they have thin cell wall, it is very easy to break it and divide. Similarly, if the cells are very big, again, it is difficult for that big cell, which is more stable, to divide easily. But if they are all small cells, they can easily divide. Similarly, the dense cytoplasm. Now, if the cytoplasm is very fluidy or very watery, what will happen when the cell will actually start dividing? That fluid-like structure will not be stable. But if it is quite dense, so even if it is dividing, the cytoplasm can arrange itself in the new cells. right? So the dense cytoplasm, small size of cell and thin cell wall, they all actually help the cell to divide, and that is why meristematic tissues have these kind of characteristics. They have large nuclei. Why large nuclei? That's because nucleus is the one which plays the most important role in cell division, right? We talked in our previous lesson while we were talking about cells, we talked about the chromatin threads, the thread-like structure and all, the chromosomes. So they are all present inside the nucleus. So that means nucleus is the one who plays the leading role as far as cell division is concerned. And here, in case of a meristematic tissue, cell division is the most important thing, and that is why they have large nuclei. They do not have vacuoles. Now, why do you think they don't have vacuoles? However, we know that in plant cells, vacuoles play an important role. So vacuoles are generally large in size. But why these meristematic tissue cells do not have vacuoles? That's because, just remember, what was the purpose of a vacuole? One purpose was storage of food, right? What was the other purpose? It gives rigidity to the cell. So more vacuoles you have, the more rigid the cell is. But in this case, we don't want the cell to be rigid. It should be less rigid so that it can easily divide. So the more rigid the cell is, the more difficult it is for it to divide. So therefore, we do not actually need these vacuoles, because we do not need the cell to be rigid. So the vacuoles are also not present. No intercellular spaces. So in case of meristematic tissue, the cells are very closely packed together, right? And there are no noticeable intercellular spaces. So these are some of the characteristics of meristematic tissues, and I hope that you will not only memorize the characteristics. Since if you have understood the purpose of a meristematic tissues, you can write these characteristics on your own, because meristematic tissues have to divide. So what are the things that will help it to divide? Thin cell wall, the first thing that should come to your mind. No vacuoles, because vacuole will make it rigid. It wants to divide. Who plays the leading role in cell division? Nucleus. So the nucleus should be large. Now it wants to divide, so it is better if they are smaller in size. So small cells with dense cytoplasm, so that the cytoplasm doesn't scatter around here and there if it is too much watery. Right? So this is how you can actually remember the characteristics of a meristematic tissues rather than just memorizing it. Again, let us have a quick look that where are the meristematic tissues actually found. Now, as I mentioned, they are found in only some specific regions of the plant where the growth is more. The growth is prominent. Now, based on which region of the plant meristematic tissues are found, they are classified into 3 types. Okay, so depending upon where the meristematic tissue is located, we will again classify them into 3 categories. So what are the 3 categories? The first one is apical meristem, intercalary meristem, and the last one is lateral meristem. So these are the 3 types of meristem depending upon where they are found. So we will discuss about each of these types in detail one by one. But let us quickly look at the location where they are found. As the name suggests, apical meristem. Apical. It is derived from the word apex. Apex means tip. So the meristem which is found in the tip of the plant, somewhere around the tip of a plant, they are apical meristem. Okay, then intercalary. What is intercalary? The meristem which are found somewhere in between. Inter means something in between. We say intercellular. That means between the cells. So it is a meristem which is found which must be located in between something. So we will look that in the next slide. Then we have lateral meristem. So maybe these kind of meristem are situated laterally. So laterally again decides the position of something. So now let us have a quick look at the next slide to see what are these 3 types of meristem. So let us first look at the apical meristem. As the name suggests, it is present at the apex, that is at the tips. So it is present at the root and stem tips. So it results in root and stem length increase. So this meristem will actually result in growth of the plant, be it primary growth or secondary growth. So the apical meristem, it is present at the apex. That means it is present at the tip of this stem and also at the tip of the root. So therefore it will cause an increase in length of the root. It will cause an increase in length of the stem. So it is actually causing a primary growth. Right? Now this increase in root and shoot length occurs due to cell division and cell enlargements. Right? The cell keeps on dividing, so new cells will be formed, so which will result in an increase in growth, and also due to cell enlargement. The cells will also increase in size. So the increase in cell number and the increase in cell size both together will result in an increase in length of the stem or an increase in length of the root. Right? So this was the apical meristem. Let us now look at the intercalary meristem. What does an intercalary meristem do? First, let us look at where is it present. It is present at the base of leaves and internodes of twigs. So where is it actually located? It is located at the base of the leaves and internodes of twigs. Now what do I mean by twigs? When you look at a plant, it will have the stem. The stem will give rise to branches. Right? These branches will again give rise to twigs. The twigs will give rise to twiglets and so on. This is how it happens, right? So these kind of meristem are present at the base of the leaves somewhere here. And they are also present at the internodes of twigs. Now the stem of the plant is divided into nodes and internodes. If you look at a plant, you would see some regions like this. Right? So these regions are known as nodes. And these regions are known as internodes. And these are the places from where the branches are arising. Right? So this meristem actually help in the growth of the leaves and the growth of the twigs. So intercalary, as the name suggests, intercalary are present in the internodes. That is why the name intercalary. So from internodes you will have the twigs, you will also have the leaves. So it will actually help in the growth of the branches, which will again give rise to twigs and twiglets. Right? So it helps in the growth of the plant that ways. So the apical meristem is increasing the root and the stem. So it is actually increasing the length of the stem and the length of the root. Intercalary meristem is increasing the branches and the leaves. Right? So that is the intercalary meristem. Now let us look at the third type, that is the lateral meristem. So what is the lateral meristem actually doing? Right? So I hope you understood what is the intercalary meristem, right? So if you want, I can draw the figure separately if you have any doubts in nodes and internodes. See, this is generally how the stem of a plant look like. So these regions are nodes and these regions are internodes. Right? So if you look at it, this is how the branches arise. This is how the leaves will also arise. Right? So it actually helps in the growth of the branches, branch formation, and also helps in the growth of the leaves. Right? Okay. Now let us look at the lateral meristem. So what do you think the lateral meristem do? Because you already saw primary growth is handled by apical meristem and the growth of branches and leaves and twigs is handled by the intercalary meristem. So what is left now? The increase in width is left, right? Which we were talking as the secondary growth. So this lateral meristem will cause an increase in the root or stem girth. What is this girth? Girth is nothing but the thickness, or we can say the circumference of the bark. Let us look at this tree. So what do you think would be the thickness, or what do you think is the circumference of this bark? So this circumference of the bark is known as girth. Now, as a plant grows, this circumference also increases. That means the girth of the plant increases. Now, when this tree was just planted as a small plant, maybe the girth was something like this. Now, gradually, with due course of time, it underwent growth, and as a result, the diameter of the bark increases, or the circumference increases, right? So, this is the secondary growth. So, the secondary growth is handled by the lateral meristem. So, the lateral meristem causes an increase in the root and stem girth. So, it doesn't only happen with the stem, it also happens with the root. You will see that for a newly planted plant, if you take it out, you will see that the roots are very tiny and thin. But if you look at a tree like this, you just cannot pluck it out. It is so difficult because the roots are thick and strong enough, right? So this secondary growth is handled by lateral meristem. Now, in lateral meristem also we have two types. One is, now the lateral meristem, there is another name for lateral meristem, which is cambium. The lateral meristem is also known as cambium. So this lateral meristem is actually handling the secondary growth, right? So there are two types of lateral meristem. One is vascular cambium and the other one is cork cambium. So at this level, we will not get into the detail of vascular cambium and cork cambium, but I'll just like to mention you what is the purpose. What is the difference between a vascular cambium and a cork cambium. Now, vascular cambium is responsible for the internal growth of the girth, because whenever I am talking about cambium, I am just talking about the increase in girth. So the vascular cambium is responsible for internal growth, and the cork cambium is responsible for the external growth. So if you want to see where does these two different types of cambium lie, you can just look at this picture. So this is a portion of the root of a big tree. So if you cut the root from between, if you just take a portion of the root, it will look somewhat like this. It will have these kind of rings. You would have heard those people of archaeology, they are looking at this rings. By counting this number of rings, they do some calculation and they can tell how old this tree is, right? So this is how a bark actually looks like with so many rings. Now, when I say cork cambium is this outer layer, this layer which you see in dark blue, right? So this outer layer is the cork cambium, which causes an increase in growth externally. So this cork cambium increases and therefore the width increases. Whereas the vascular cambium is this layer in light blue. You can see a layer in light blue, right? This arrow is pointing to this light blue layer. So this light blue layer will keep on increasing internally. So this will cause an increase in internal growth. So the vascular cambium will keep increasing internally. Cork cambium will keep increasing externally. And as a result, the width of the tree or the girth of the root will increase. So this vascular cambium and cork cambium together causes the secondary growth in a plant. Right? So I hope you understood the three types of meristematic tissue. What are the three types of meristems? The first was apical meristem, which is present at apex and it causes primary growth, that is, it causes increase in length. Second was intercalary, which is present at the internodes and it results in branch formation at the nodes. The third is lateral meristem or the cambium, which causes secondary growth because it increases the girth of the root or stem. So here again we have two types: vascular cambium, which causes internal growth, and cork cambium, which causes the external growth. Correct?
So children, did you find the video useful? If yes, do not forget to share it with your friends so that they can also benefit out of this video. And I will meet you all very soon with a new video, with a new topic. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.